Welcome to I Know a Guy Bicycles, hanging out with the guy. Hi, I'm Justin, the guy. Hey, we've been working on this bike here and I'm starting to get it all back together, and I got all the parts on there except for the chain. I didn't include that in the last video because I needed to show how to cut the chain and install it. And I want to go over a couple things about chains. Chains are, it's a confusing little world about chains and replacing them. First off, you definitely want to make sure you match the speed. I've come across bikes that somebody's thrown on a chain replacement thinking it may work. It might be a 10-speed system in the back. What makes it a 10-speed? Let's follow back up a little bit. What makes it a 10-speed, 8-speed, 9-speed, 11-speed, or whatever is how many cogs you have in the back. Not how many teeth per se, but how many cogs. And this one has 10 cogs going across, and that's 10 shifts to the rear derailleur. That determines your speed of the bike. So starting there, determining how many gears you have, like, okay, it's a 10 speed. This shifts 10 times. I'm gonna need a 10-speed chain. Then you go Google 10-speed chains. And you got a whole plethora of 10-speed chains. You got Shimano, KMC, SRAM, what have you, Campy, and so forth. Okay, so the second one is trying to identify what chain's gonna work on the drivetrain I have. If it is a Campy, it needs to be a Campy specific chain. Campy is kind of like your Ferrari parts, if you will. Shimano is a little more universal because Shimano has been setting the standards and been in the market for so long. There's been a lot of companies that have kind of matched their pitch and chain and width and chains. So you got a Shimano drivetrain, but it can take a SRAM, it can take a KMC, it can take a couple other different brands. I forget the YYT, something like that. Different brands of chains. So keep in mind, if you want to look, make sure you look on the description if it's Shimano compatible. If you have a Shimano drivetrain, gonna focus on mostly Shimano because most of my bikes are Shimano, and Camping is the unicorn of the bike world out there. So mostly unfortunately, I'm sorry. Going to be focusing on Shimano today. So this is Shimano 10-speed drivetrain. So I don't have a Shimano chain, but I do have a SRAM 10-speed. 10-speed chain, it's a 10-speed there, and it's going to say on the back here somewhere it's compatible, or you can look it up online or on SRAM.com. So I did, fortunately, I do have the old chain, and the reason why I'm changing this old chain, well, not because it's all gunky and dirty, I haven't cleaned it. The reason why I didn't clean it is I have a chain tool, chain checker. So when I went to check this chain with my chain checker, it was a lot easier on the bike. You want to be at 0.5 or less. This is almost at the end of it's like over to almost a 0.1 or 1.0, which means it's stretched. That's one of the wear points on most bikes is the chain is stretched. So I check in a couple places to determine in that spot. I remember one spot was like super sloppy. So determine the chain is stretched. So how do you cut these guys? Well, under the assumption, and this gets you in trouble sometimes, under the assumption this may have been a manufactured chain installation. That means it's already the correct length. His boogers come longer. So this is going to be a longer chain. So what you do is you move the camera so you can actually see better. Earthquake. So there you got my chain. Sorry for the unprofessional, but I don't have time to cut and slice. So we have the chain, and you line it up. So you got the end here, end to end, and you go link by link, measure it out so it matches. And this is going to be cut right here, and you need a chain tool to do so. Since this does come with a master link that replaces this pad link, so I just need to cut it here. And scrap chains is always good to throw in your pack. Just one little scrap piece, just in case you get in a situation where you break a chain, you can kind of work that, you can use this to splice in a piece of chain if need be, if you broke your chain. So got that back together. This is measured out. So, yeah. So, got the drivetrain here, then you have to thread it in there. These guys like to kink up on you. So you start with, I like to go through the root derailleur and thread it down through the jockey pulleys, pull over the small cog. If this is cabled up and everything, you want to put it into small and small and thread it through the front derailleur. And this is always good to wear gloves. And another thing to note too, new chains already have a manufacturer lube on there. And it's usually a little thicker. And it's good just to leave that on for for a while until you get to the point where the chain is really gunky. You need to put it in a sauna cleaner and clean it. And this power link, should probably show you. Power link, 2 little bits like this. One goes one way and the other one goes on another piece of chain. It goes underneath and they kind of link together like so. And that's where this chain tool comes in handy. So put it on one direction, put it on the other direction. Hook them up. Use the chain tool to pop it in place. There you go. Your chain's installed. So yeah, you don't need to lube, add more lube because it's already been lubed. And it's ready to go. The old chain, this one's all gunky and dirty. Goes right in the recycling bin. So once you got a new chain on here. So here's the thing about chains and cassettes and the drivetrain wear. This is probably what I should have started with, but if you're still hanging on to this video, you're gonna get a little gold nugget. Usually you could do 2 chains compared to 1 cassette, and the cassette is what they call for the back of the gears in the back that go on the hub. Reason being is these guys wear, the teeth here wear out to the chain. So the chain stretches, and that's why you want to replace it before it gets too stretched, because it'll start compromising these cogs. If it compromises the cogs, it's going to cause that new chain to jump. So in other words, recap, this chain is stretched. I don't know the history of the bike. So there is a chance when I get on this bike and put under pressure each load of each one of these cogs, it might skip or jump. That means the cassette's been compromised and needs to be replaced. If you have a newer bike and you know the history of it, you usually get through 1 chain, you ride it, and it depends also to your type of riding. We'll go down in a second. But you can usually do 2 chains replacement to compare to 1 cassette. So if you get to your second chain, you might as well just replace that cassette. Cassettes, they're not too terribly expensive. You're anywhere between a $30 to $50 or $60 replacement on the lower end ones, and you can go crazy with the titanium and bits later, upper end ones. But just to replace it, to get going for average riding, yeah, you can replace this guy with the second chain. Chain rings up front, those gears, these are a little harder aluminum and sometimes stamped steel, and these wear out slower. It takes a long time to wear out these guys here. So there's no really correlation of a time limit. I mean, they do put on a time limit, but this is the bit that blows all those time limits out of the water. It's kind of like, oh, you get an oil change after so many miles. Well, the chain, the cassette, and the crank and the derailleurs, the front chain rings, all dependent on how you ride. Your kind of riding determines how much this wear is. And what I mean by that is, if you shift a lot, I ride with a high revolution. So I'm constantly shifting, and I'm also moving and distributing that load over the whole drivetrain. So only once in a while I'll stand up and grind that gear. If you're a grinder or basher shifter, in other words, you get in that gear and you just grind the heck out of it and you just don't shift at all. You're just powering through it. That's going to stretch your chain a little bit faster because you're not distributing that load, because you're putting more torque on each of those cogs. And also those particular cogs that you stay in the most will wear out faster because the other ones are not being utilized, right? Are not being distributed out. So the more you shift, the more distribute. Can't tell you that if you're going to switch from a grinder to a high spin shifter, that's your style of riding. And I'm not telling you to change that. I'm just saying you got to accept that if you're a grinder, you're going to be wearing out parts a little bit faster. That's what it comes to. If you're a type that has a high revolution, you do a lot of changing and shifting gears to accommodate those up and down hills to keep the cadence the same and fast. Therefore, your drivetrain is going to last just a little bit longer. We're not talking about huge, but it does over a period of time affect that wear patterns and so forth. So, going into recap, make sure you got the right speed. Make sure it's either Shimano or Campanoli or whatever compatible. Then you got to make sure it's cut to the right length. And matching it by cog on a chain that's pre-existing, that's good. There's a whole other set of videos out there to actually install chains and measure them. I'm not going to go into that. Park Tool has all that. I just want to give you the 101 or why you need a different chain, because sometimes I skip over that piece of it. And in this case, this bike got a brand new chain, so that's a nice little upgrade, clean, and that's part of my mission is replacing parts that do need to be replaced. So there you go. That includes my installment of chains. Here's the shameless plug. So if you like these videos, hit the subscribe on YouTube, follow me on Facebook, or join my email list on my website on knowaguybicycle.com. Thank you for spending the time with me today. And I hope to see you next time. Thank you for your time. Hope you learned something.